Alex Purdie, welcome to CamTalks.
Hi, Cam. All right.
Alex, thank you so much for joining me. You just reminded me it's Alex Purdie, IE. That's a fun name. I'm sure a lot of people just know you as Alex, but where's the name Purdie come from?
Yeah. I do know. It's Scottish.
Aye,
My
Scottish.
variant. But I think they're more sheep stealers than clans. But it comes from two words in Latin, which mean per diem, which means I think it's basically like by God, which sounds very exciting, but really it just meant they were very religious and used to go around saying by God
Oh,
all the time.
Well, by God,
but-
Alex, thank you so much for joining me
Yeah.
today. It's very exciting because you are one of the youngest Alderney legends we've had on this show to date. How old are you, Alex?
I'm 27.
So you're 27 years old, and so you're an ecological scientist, and you came to Alderney 2021. Am I right?
Yeah, late 21.
I know how to Google stuff. That's exciting. Alex, how did you first find out about Alderney, and what are you doing here?
Yeah, so I first came to Alderney when I was quite young, actually. But only once before coming to work here. We had a boat on the south coast of the UK, and we sailed over. And we stopped in Alderney. It was very rainy, I have to say, and our outboard fell off in Bray Harbour.
Oh no!
But I remember the fish tank and the divers, which was a nice memory. So I knew about Channel Islands. And then I studied marine biology at university. I did a few jobs after that, but I saw a role going at the Wildlife Trust, which looked really exciting. And it was an internship actually, but it was funded, so that meant I got some financial support and I got accommodation. And essentially that was to help conduct all the work on the Ramsar site, which is the marine wetland of international importance on the west coast of Alderney. So I came here because to me that looked like a really exciting opportunity, not just because of coming to live in a really interesting place, but also the responsibility I'd be able to take on, and the work I'd be doing would be a lot more than someone else in that position of their career in my field might be able to do. There's a lot of internships in the UK in ecology and marine biology. They tend to be unpaid. You tend to be making coffee. But in Alderney, because it's a smaller charity, the Wildlife Trust, than most others, it means you can take a bit more responsibility.
Wow, there you go. What got you into wildlife in the first place? Were you always very just fascinated by creatures and stuff like this? What's your earliest memory?
Yeah,
of being...
I think like all little boys either like big trucks or dinosaurs. I like dinosaurs.
So you're all over Jurassic Park.
Oh, 100%.
I love that.
Not the sequels. Get rid of them.
No.
But I used to go snorkelling all the time as a kid. I used to love being out on the coast. I grew up near the south coast of England. Used to love being out on the coast. And yeah, for me, snorkeling was probably the way in, to kind of seeing just a different world. It's amazing. You can be on a seashore. You can be on a harbour wall, and it's like very man-made and built, and then you go into the water and it's like you're in a rainforest. And the amount of wildlife you see is amazing. And I always think what's really great about the marine world in particular is you never know what's kind of around the corner. You never know what you're going to see. It could be anything. It could be a little crab or it could be a dolphin.
That's scary, man. And I mean, I've been snorkeling a couple of times, and I hate the sea, man. To be honest with you, I like jumping off the duggy and going for a little swim every so often. So you must really love like David Attenborough documentaries, Finding Nemo, that kind of stuff. I mean, was there a period of your life when you decided you're going to study this and you're going to? I mean, what were the opportunities when you were younger that you thought, oh, that's what I want to do?
Yeah. I always loved like animals, and especially wild animals, and fish in particular. So it was something even from like primary school age where I thought, I'm interested in that. But there are other things I looked at. I really enjoyed like drama. I enjoyed arts. I looked at doing chemistry at university as well. But I remember in particular, I went to an open day at a university, and there was this lab and they were demonstrating an experiment. I just thought, oh God, I really don't want to sit and do experiments for the rest of my life in a lab. It just sounds so boring.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel quite passionate about marine life and about terrestrial wildlife as well. So wildlife on land, etc. I feel like passionate about it, and I feel really interested in it. So I just knew that that's what I wanted
You
to
know,
do.
you're going to regret saying on a podcast that you like drama. I believe
Oh yeah.
that the theatre club are going to be looking for you, Alex. So obviously, you know, you went to university. What did you study exactly at university? Was it like a marine biology type
Yeah,
degree?
so I went to Swansea University, and I chose to go there. Originally, I was looking at places like Southampton, which are famously good for marine biology. But I went to Swansea because it had a good course and a good practical course. But when I went there, I just had a really good feeling from the place, and I think that's very important, really. I studied marine biology. So that's essentially it's a bit like zoology in terms of the course at Swansea. So it tends to you look at more things like animals and the interactions between animals. Also things like diseases, ecology of plants and things like that. You're kind of understanding how the natural world works, but with a real focus on the marine side of things.
Is there like exams and stuff that you have to take where you have to like know every species of every animal?
Yeah, yeah, there actually is. I
Really?
think
Oh
sometimes
no.
there's you call them like a taxonomic ID exams, but always it would always be if there's a field course, you'd have to learn to ID all the animals that you might find. Well, all that's crazy because there'll be
I
like
love
you
that.
could look in one rock pool, there'll be 100 species, and I can't ID all of them now by a long way. And there are specialists who are taxonomists. I'm not a taxonomist.
Sounds like you're in the right place, my friend. Come to the Channel Islands, be a taxonomist.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But seriously, I mean, there must be thousands of species of every type. I mean, can you define like the amount of creatures there are? So we've got kind of like fish, mammals. Are these give me some? I'm a real layman term
Yeah.
guy.
So you've got like firstly you've got obviously you've got plants, you've got animals, and they're what we call eukaryotes. So that's creatures with a cell with a proper with like multi-celled organisms, right? God, I'm really having to dread up my first year. This is A-level biology.
Dragging him
Christ.
back into yeah. Here we go. You're on the spot
We'll be
now.
asking for edits when I get something wrong.
No,
But essentially you've got plants, animals, and fungi, which are tend to be multicellular. You've then got prokaryotes. They're things I'm trying to remember. I think the main difference is they don't have a nucleus, so that central bit of the cell. They don't necessarily have that central bit, and I'm probably going to remember that's wrong. But essentially, they're less. We might call them advanced. They're actually bacteria. That's your viruses. Okay, we'll ignore those for now because that's a whole other kettle of fish.
I'm still
bacteria and
stuck on
viruses.
plants right now.
Right.
Okay, we have plants, animals,
animals, fungi.
fungi.
So of plants, you've got algae. So that's most things in the sea are algae. And then you've got terrestrial plants like angiosperms, which are like your kind of classic flowering plants and oak trees and things like that. You've got gymnosperms, that includes conifers and ferns and things like that. And then there's also kind of more
like
complex
flowers and stuff.
Yeah,
and...
that's that. Well, that's the angiosperms. And then you've got other kind of more complex intermediaries. You've got obviously mosses, but there's even things like lichens, which are symbiotic.
Yeah,
so
I've
they've
heard
got
about them.
fungi and
They're the ones that grow on the walls,
algae.
right? They
Yeah,
look like a
yeah.
scab.
Yeah, they look like a scab, but they're a great sign. You know, we see loads of this particular lichen, which is really almost looks like you call it like foliose, but it's got like lots of little strands. It's blue, light blue. You'll see it on
Aw.
trees here, right? That's a sign of good air quality.
Oh,
So if you
really?
go to inner city in the UK,
Not
or
gonna
even
see 'em.
if you're going to go to town, really unlikely.
Wow, so we got pretty good air here.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. Okay, so plants, animals.
Yeah,
then
and so
within
then
the animal
within the
group-
animals, yeah, sorry, probably started a bit too broad, but we'll
Oh, good.
knock
Oh,
it
good.
back.
Well, we
We'll get
can
back
stay
down to
broad.
animals. So,
I'm sure
it's
people
fine.
are finding it interesting.
So animals, we tend to think of it, you know, when you think about it, like normally you might think, oh, mammals, reptiles, fish, whatever, insects. But really, it's invertebrates, and there's loads of them. And then there's some vertebrates.
Okay,
as well.
what is an invertebrate?
Invertebrate is anything without a vertebra. So, you know, we've got backbones.
Yeah.
So vertebrate, you know, are vertebrae. You call animals with a backbone a vertebrate. That's essentially they've developed this kind of cord. So we've got this cord that runs down our spine, and that has all our nerves in it. Every other vertebrate, so dogs, cats, fish, you know, whatever, they have this same cord, which is key for their life, and it sends signals up and down their body.
Interesting.
Invertebrates, that's animals without a backbone.
The spineless ones.
Spineless ones have many spines, though, sometimes, but not a vertebrate.
Wow.
So, like, you know, ants. ants, they don't necessarily have that single central cord running down their body, and they have an exoskeleton. So instead of bones inside their body,
Yeah.
they have a hard outer shell. But you're also, with the invertebrates, it's wild because you're also looking at things like corals, which are colonial animals. They're almost like each individual coral polyp is almost like a little jellyfish.
Wow.
So and
And
they
they
form
do
these
look
huge
very
colonial animals.
plant-like as well.
They look very plant-like, and a lot of the time, say if you go into a rock pool and you are looking, say you look under a rock, there might be loads of colourful things. They look like plants. They're not. They're
They're
all animals, but they're animals which don't move. So
Wow. Okay.
we call them like sessile. Sessile's the word for it. A sessile animal.
Lazy sessile animals.
Exactly. But
Brilliant.
what they're doing is like, you know a sea anemone. Right?
Yes,
Sea anemone
heard
is
of it,
quite
yeah.
quite famous. They'll sit on the rock and they've got big tentacles.
Yeah, yeah.
And what they're doing is they're suspension feeding. So they're feeding on little particles of food or little animals which are suspended in the water. Suspension feeding.
Interesting.
And so that's what a lot of these other sessile animals are doing. These animals which don't move.
Just chilling.
So they're chilling. They're suspension feeders, or they might be filter feeders, which is where, like a mussel, they suck water through themselves, and they'll have little tiny, gills or little kind of feeding apparatus that they'll use to catch food.
It's got me hungry now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you got animals, and then what else in the terms of the
So
diverse?
we've then got, if you imagine how like evolution's worked, if we ignore the invertebrates for now, because there really are so many of them. There's way more inverts than anything else, but we can focus on the vertebrates, right? They're a bit more like us. So if you imagine the first vertebrate was almost like a really basic fish. It would have been a fish probably without any bones, just with that single cord. And that's evolved off and it's diverged a few times. You've then got fish, and you like bony fish with bones, like, whatever, a mackerel. And you have fish with cartilage instead of bones. So cartilaginous fish, that's sharks, that's rays, things like that. And then from fish, there's a bit more goes on. You've got two different kinds of fish, whatever. From fish, we then get amphibians, and then from those amphibians, we get reptiles. From reptiles, we get mammals.
Oh my
and
gosh.
also reptiles. And from reptiles, we get birds as well. So all of those,
Oh
all
my
that diversity of life we
Yeah,
see around
yeah.
us, it all came from one fish, really.
That's
So
amazing.
we're all, in a way, if you ask a taxonomist or an evolutionary biologist, we're all fish, which is a bit strange. And sharks
Interesting.
aren't fish, which is kind of even stranger.
This is bizarre because I think that when you study this in school, you're given a very light, education on it. But I imagine that once you got to university, you were surrounded by people who were also learning this as well. And was it fun to learn all the different species and then obviously go and find them as well? Because that's probably one of the nice things about knowing this stuff is that you go walk outside and suddenly you can say, oh, I know what that is now.
Yeah, and that is eye-opening, I think. And the same goes whenever you learn a new thing. So, for example, learning to ID like birdsong. Before you learn to ID birdsong, you'll go out and you'll listen to birds and you think, oh, that's really nice. That's another sparrow, or that's another, or like, nice song. And you might think it's one going. And then as soon as you start to learn to ID them, you'll notice that it's not the same species. It's actually, there's 10 different species around you all calling.
Wow.
And you suddenly, it opens your eyes to the diversity that is around you. And the same goes for marine life. Once you start to identify things and understand what there is. It is, yeah.
Dude, this is brilliant,
Exciting.
man. I mean, like, it's so nice to understand where your passions come from. But obviously, coming to Alderney, do we have a unique? I mean, I would know we've got a very unique wildlife here. But what is it that you would say about Alderney that's so unique compared to the rest of the world?
Okay, there's a couple of things. So I'd start with like the physical side of it. So physical, like geography, etc. We're located in an interesting place. So we're located almost between two ecological regions. So you've got that northern area with the UK, and then you've got the European area. So we get a lot of species that you get in both. So things like ormers. There you go.
Oh, what's this?
Ormers.
This
Ormer shell.
This
You'll
is
know
a
it.
shell. Found on the beach. Was this?
Yeah, I think that was probably clonk. That one.
Wowzers.
So you'll see though, there's a small yellow tag on it with a number. So
yeah. Okay, so an ormer is this is a European or a UK?
it's called a green ormer. And Alderney is pretty much as far north as they go. You don't really find them in the UK at all.
Wow.
So they're a real, we're about as far north as they get. Proper like Channel Islands specialty, of course, as well.
Incredible. Okay, so this is obviously an invertebrate.
Yep, yep. It's a mollusk. It's a gastropod, so like a snail. It's basically like a big snail.
Oh
Yeah.
wow! So can you eat these?
People do. I have not. Um,
We'll get on to that
yeah.
in a later part of the episode. Okay, so you've got the wildlife that comes from the south of the
Yeah,
island and
so
more the
there's
European
things like
region.
ormers. Also, we obviously have lots of kinds of fish like gilthead bream, etc., which are now pushing into our waters because of warming sea temperatures. We then have northerly species which they might not get further south. So I mean, some examples of that. There's a particular type of bird called a pied wagtail, right? You'll see them everywhere. And in England they're pied wagtails, and in Europe they're white wagtails. And pied wagtails are those black and white wagtails, right? Wagtails are birds with their tails and they go like that.
Oh, I've
It's
seen
pretty
them. Yeah,
distinctive.
yeah, yeah.
You'll see them on the beaches all the time here. We get both. So we get that northern species coming down. We get the pied wagtail, which has a black back, and then we get the southern variant, which is the same species, but it's almost like a different, you know, group within it.
Oh my
And
god!
it comes up from the north, and we'll get them both
Wow,
mixing on Alderney, and
that's
you'll
so
see them all
difficult
on the
because
beaches together.
how do you know which one's which?
Well,
They must
yeah.
look exactly
Yeah.
the same.
Well, they the difference between them is, and you can do this. This is like quite an easy one for people to do themselves. Is if you look at a pied wagtail, that black and white bird, it's got a black back. The white wagtail looks exactly the same, but its back is grey. So it's
Okay.
once you get your eye, it's quite an obvious distinction. Some of these things, it's blooming not, and it's a
Yeah,
nightmare.
yeah,
But
yeah.
with those it is, thankfully.
Did it take you a while when you first got here? Because 2021, that was what, 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm.
It was like the first few weeks, just sort of you walking around being like, bloody hell, like it's that one. No, it's that one. You walking around with your book or your iPhone, probably just sort of
Yeah.
checking
Android,
out.
please.
Yeah, yeah.
No, there's definitely some things are a learning curve, but
Crash
at the
course.
same time, there's a lot of similarities. I suppose I did a lot of my training in Wales, and that's different again. We've got species that we don't even see on the south coast in Wales, and every habitat is going to be different. A lot of the species are similar though, so especially our seabirds are species which you get in the UK. So ganets, puffins, fulmar, those are three of our kind of most iconic seabirds. So ganets, obviously the big white seabirds, black wingtips, they're huge.
They're great.
Yeah. Ganets are actually the largest breeding seabird in the northern hemisphere.
Oh wow,
They got a 2 meter wingspan.
that's
So
crazy
that's
because
bigger than me.
I've just realised you don't really ever see gannets on Alderney though, do you? You don't. You
No,
never
no.
see them down the harbour trying to get your fish and chips.
No.
Like they're all on Ganet Rock, which is such an amazing attraction, really, because you always want to take someone to Ganet Rock, but you stand back and you see them. That's quite far away, isn't it? Like,
It's about 300 meters offshore.
is it
Yeah.
really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks closer.
Yeah. I
But
mean, so that is something. You asked what's unique about Alderney's wildlife. That is something really unique. There's not many places in the world where you can be that close to a seabird colony like that. And there's a couple of sites with them on the mainland on cliffs, but really only a couple. That is really special.
it's
Most
like a
most
viewing
gannet
platform
colonies,
as well.
yeah, most gannet colonies are miles offshore,
Wow.
miles and miles and miles. You can only access them with boats that can go a
And so
long
you say
way.
these things are big, like because I've been on the boat with you and I've seen them, semi close up, but when they're in front of you, are they really?
Yeah, so they got a 2 meter wingspan, so that's way bigger than this table.
Oh my
that's in front of us.
lord!
When you see them, so sometimes we might rescue them, like if they're a bit injured or whatever. When you see them in a cage, it's like a dog. Like it's absurd. They are big beasts,
Wow.
really big animals, and they're not actually. So like you comparing them to seagulls, right? And they kind of look like a seagull, but like you said, they never come on and sell chips. They're completely different, like ecologically. Okay, so they're what we call plunge divers. So what that means is they're an active hunter, unlike a gull, which usually is a scavenger. The gannets, they're an active hunter, so they're the cheetah compared to the
dive bomber.
hyenas or whatever.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, literally.
So what they do is they'll fly about 60 meters up in the air, and they'll come down. They'll dive down. They'll hit the water up to about 60 miles an hour. So I mean that's absurdly fast, right? Absurdly fast.
Wow.
Head first, they'll skewer fish on the way down, or they'll come back up and they'll skewer them on the way up.
Like a kebab, just
Yeah, straight down the middle, and then they'll eat them. They'll actually go into their stomachs. They'll then fly back to the colony to feed the chick.
So they'll regurgitate it once back at the colony.
Yeah.
That's crazy because I mean, how the hell do they spot fish in the sea?
So they do have polarized lenses on their eyes. So that obviously helps. But one other thing is often they'll work in tandem with marine predators. So things like dolphins, which will force a bait ball to the surface. And
Ah,
it's something actually. So our gannets are some of the furthest foraging, right, in the world. You know, they're foraging on average around 200 miles, or at least 200. You know, a long distance, right? In fact, the furthest one we had went to Norway and back, which is 3,000 kilometers.
wow! What was in Norway?
Evidently some good herring, like, you know.
Some good herring. I
Um,
love that.
but that's a long way.
Yeah.
And you remember I said they eat the fish. They go into their stomachs. They don't have like a kind of storage area. That means that the fish will digest. So if it's got to fly back further, there's less nutrients for the chick by the time it gets
Mm.
back. So that's a problem. And part of that reason is that the fish have been pushed further north by changing climates. But something, I mean, we saw it the other day. We saw some tuna hunting, right? And they were forcing groups of bait fish. Can't tell exactly what they were. They could have been anything, you know, herring, mackerel, whatever. They were forcing groups of bait fish to the surface, and you had, you know, a couple of hundred, maybe up to 500 gulls, and you had hundreds of gannets feeding there. And that's something that's been missing from our seas until recently, mostly because of overfishing by humans in the past. But it's positive to see that coming back, and it's that linked ecology. You know, we can't just think of those gannets as one thing on their own and they'll go out and they'll be
Mm.
fine. They've got to have that system that's built around them with the marine predators there as well to force the prey fish to the surface to then be able to predate it. And it's not like, the other thing to think about is, it's not like, say, when we hunt for fish and, you know, we saw a trawler out there at the same time. We saw a super trawler at the same time.
They're not
right?
good, are they?
Yeah. And so when a trawler takes fish, it comes out of the ocean, it goes into your supermarkets, goes to Iceland or whatever as fish fingers. We eat it, goes into a sewage plant, and eventually it comes out purified, whatever. It's waste. You know, you're not getting any positives out of that. When a gannet eats fish, or when a tuna eats a fish, it eats that, it digests it, it then excretes it into the marine environment, and plankton feed on that. You know, plankton feed on that. Baby fish will feed on that. The bigger fish will feed on that, and it's a cycle, and then you get more bait fish again. So
Mm.
it's all part of that natural
Well,
process.
are we the only animal in the world that does this this terrible sort of? I mean, I don't know how do you explain it. Like it's like a waste of ourselves. I don't know. It's weird because like you're absolutely right. We're making things all the time that we then just put in a landfill.
Mm.
No other animal does that, right?
Well, I'm sure if they don't, I'm sure if you know, a fox was capable of making loads of clothes and doing that, it would. You know, I don't agree. There's that thing like, oh, humans are. What's it in the Matrix? You were saying you watched the Matrix earlier. He says humanity's a virus. It's the only animal that will use all the resources up. No other animal will do that. It's a load of rubbish. If a fox had a chance to use all the resources up, of course it would.
They'd do it.
Yeah, they would. But they have evolved to be in that natural environment. Humans evolved in probably sub-Saharan Africa. We've moved out of that area, and we've embraced technology,
Yeah,
and
of
that's given
course.
us these kind of unusual advantages. Doesn't mean we can't operate
Mm.
in a way that doesn't impact the environment, or rather, you know, that allows the environmental systems to still function. And I think
Mm.
that's important to remember. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. We can change things.
Mm. I mean, because I know that the gannets do put some of the litter and waste that we use to good use,
Well,
right?
yeah. So, like you said, I mean, if anyone's been to a gannet colony like Let's Attack or Ortac, you'll see that unfortunately there's quite a lot of marine litter present on the colony. And that's because gannets, so what they'll do is they make their nests out of seaweed and things like that, or sometimes even grass. They'll rip grass up from Les Attack when they come back after the winter, right? But to a gannet, a bit of floating fishing line looks like really brilliant nest material, right? It's bright, so they can see it easily, and they'll come in, they'll pick it up, and they'll put it on their nest. And we'll even see them fighting over it because they think it's so good. And that sounds great. It's
Wow.
like a great reuse of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it poses a big health risk to them because seaweed, you know, it rots down and it breaks easily, etc. Plastic doesn't; it never does, and it forms these kind of traps, and the gannets will get entangled in them. It's very sad to see. We monitor the productivity of them, so we'll follow nests through the season, and sometimes you'll see one of the gannets on your nest or an adjacent nest has got its wing caught or its neck caught or its foot caught.
Oh no.
And these birds, they can live for a week or so or 2 weeks trapped in a noose.
Mm.
There's nothing you can really do, and it's all because of that plastic, unfortunately.
I want to take a very quick break to thank Bell & Co for helping to sponsor this episode. If you're looking for a place to live on Alderney, whether it's renting or buying, go and visit Bell & Co. They have all the information about what's available on Alderney and can also help guide you to some of the best things to do on the island. Go and visit bellandcoalderney.com and find out how you can escape to paradise. Back to the episode. I mean, it's amazing that you can even see this going on, because I know that you've got the cameras installed and you go out and do surveys and stuff. Just tell me a bit more about the Ramsar site. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Because this is something that most people in Alderney actually probably don't understand what the Ramsar site is. But this is a part of the island which is particularly interesting to ecologists. For what reason?
Yeah, so the Ramsar site is the west coast of Alderney and Baru and all the islands around that. So that includes Ortac and Lezatak. Doesn't quite get to Casquettes. It's a marine wetland of international importance, and it's called the Ramsar site because there's a particular international conference. International what do you call them? Treaty called convention called the Ramsar Convention, right? And that's on the protection of important wetland areas. And the Ramsar site in Alderney satisfied a number of criteria that means it is of international importance. So it's not just important here, it's not just important in the UK, it's important globally. Right?
Wow, that's cool.
And those there's a number of things. So firstly, the obvious one is the huge numbers of seabirds. It supports almost 2% of the world's ganets. That's quite significant. We've got a high percentage of the world's lesser blackback of the UK's lesser blackback gulls even, and we've also got important populations of storm petrels, which are a very small seabird on Baru, and things like the puffins as well. Although they're not a large population, a couple of hundred, they are important regionally. They're one of the largest populations in the English Channel, and we were talking earlier about how some species are maybe moving further north. Puffins are a great example of that.
No.
They're being pushed further north.
No, we can't lose our puffins.
Well, yeah, I know. And the problem is warming temperatures are pushing fish, those prey fish, either further north or deeper in the sea. And that's meant that our puffin population has gone from, 40 odd thousand after the war, down to, a few hundred.
Wow.
There is some positives. That population has been stable and possibly increasing in the last 20 years. And partly that's due to things like the protections which have come in from local people like the warden here, which has helped, give these guys a bit of breathing space. Because I think something else that's important to think about is that, yes, warming climate has put a huge amount of pressure on these animals, but it's a tipping scale, and they might be able to deal with warming temperatures, meaning they have to go further fish. But if they're also dealing with, overfishing, people taking their eggs, disturbance, that's when that scale tips. So it's really important especially in our position where we're a small island and we can do what we can for a changing climate. Campaigning is probably the main thing. But we've got to protect our species in every way that we can, to give them the best chance of coping with what's probably coming.
I really appreciate that. And mostly because it's always multiple problems, isn't it? I know that people like to talk in very black and white. It's this person's fault or it's his fault. But like the world is always changing and there's new challenges coming in. So warmer temperatures, the bait fish are going other places. It's bloody hard enough to see these puffins anyway. I don't want them to leave. But what is the reality? I mean, will Alderney lose its puffins?
I certainly hope not. And as I said, at the moment, the population does look healthy. If you think of it as like a remnant population, so these guys are clinging on in this area because, and they forage, maybe puffins forage, I think, around 50 miles max. So it's only really this region. That's not very far in the context. It's only halfway across the channel, and most of it's probably much closer. They're hanging around here, and they've been able to because the conditions are good for them. We can support this many puffins. So as long as nothing worse happens, as long
Mm.
as there's no big problems,
So
then
they really
it should
like
be
Baru.
okay.
So Baru is their home. It's their crib.
Hmm.
They've really enjoyed living on there. For how long? How many years have the puffins been
Oh,
there?
great question. Puffins. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows.
Pre-war though, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
pre-war. So puffins are definitely pre-war and probably a long time before that. Not necessarily to say that's going back tens of thousands of
sure,
years
sure.
without archaeological evidence.
Yeah,
Absolutely
yeah.
no way of telling that. And actually, the gannets are a great example of that. So Alderney's gannet trees, they're known as the garden rocks, right? A lot of people call them garden rocks here. So Lesitac is often known as garden rocks. They're not known as the garden rocks because they're covered in gannets. They're known as the garden rocks probably because before World War II, they weren't covered in gannets. And
Right,
they would have
okay.
looked a bit like, say, the South Cliffs when they've got wildflowers all over them.
Oh,
They might have had that.
wow.
They also would have had other seabirds breeding on them, so there would have been quite a lot of bird poo still.
Right, right.
But that's probably where that name comes from. And it was only in 1940 when the evacuation was happening. A naval officer who had kind of a bit of an interest in seabirds, he went out to Ortac, which is the further north of our two gannet colonies, and he saw one gannet nest, just one. Came back after the war. The Germans had bombed Ortac. They used it as target practice. And there were then
Germans.
200 gannets on Les Attack and some on
Right.
Ortac still. And since then, the numbers just went up and up and up and up until they started to plateau around 2015, possibly because of low productivity. So when I say productivity, I mean low numbers of chicks being born because of that warming temperature, meaning they're having to forage further. Possibly because they were just getting full.
Right. That makes sense.
And actually in 2022, I remember when I first arrived here, we'd had gannets looking around Cocklohoo, which is another island. Cocklohoo is
Cocklohoo?
another island on the south coast.
Of Alderney?
Yeah, so
Wow.
if people are familiar with Alderney, if you walk along the south coast, there's one island in particular which is big offshore on the south coast. It's the only one which isn't connected to the tide.
Is this near Telegraph Bay?
Yes, kind of. There's two stacks which are right next to Telegraph Bay.
Yeah.
They're called the Twin Sisters. You've got Lanash, which is next to Telegraph Bay, and then Forkey, which is on the other side. You've then got Cocklohoo. Is if you keep going out to sea, it's about I think it's about 500 meters offshore, on the south coast. Beautiful stack. It's currently got breeding populations of guillemots. It's got razorbill. It's got fulmar, and it's got no rats, which is obviously very important for all of that.
Rats? Why are there rats on Baru?
There's no rats on Baru either, and
Thank
that's
God.
actually what's so
Yeah.
important about those two sites is they're rat free, compared to mainland Alderney, which has rats, and therefore there are no puffins breeding on mainland Alderney.
Well, how the hell did we get rats here, man? That's crazy, isn't
Well,
it?
yeah.
Should we just get rid of the rats? I feel like we could get it done in a day.
If
Like,
it was, yeah, I mean, look, if it was doable, then I think it would be a great project. It- that is a huge undertaking to eliminate rats from the whole of Alderney. You're talking about a big project. So they've done it in a couple of places in New Zealand, and they've done it in one of the islands of Scilly. And if there was appetite for it, then it would have huge benefit for our wildlife.
should we do it?
Look, from a purely conservation point of view, well, yeah, it would be amazing because all of a sudden, so rats are really have really negative impacts on the environment, right? It's not just seabirds. They're predating seabird chicks, etc. It's ground nesting birds. It's native mammals. It's our native reptiles like slow worms. It's native amphibians. They're basically fantastic predators. And actually, you asked about other species which have been a problem. Rats have done so well with humans. So, and also to put it in perspective, we have two species of rat in Alderney, black rat and brown rat. Neither are native. Okay, they've both come from Asia. Black rats, quite a long time ago. A couple of thousand years. Still immeasurable time. So a couple of thousand years they came over. And then brown rats, we also call them Norway rats. They came over. I think it's around the 1800s, maybe a little bit earlier. They're called Norway rats because they came on Norwegian ships again from the Far East.
God damn Norwegians, man.
Yeah,
This is
I know.
crazy. I think I've only ever seen one rat on Alderney, down by the Dougie when I was a kid. Where the hell are these rats?
Yes.
Have you seen many?
Yeah. You do see them. Yeah.
Really? Where, I mean, you obviously go out looking for all sorts of things. And where do you see most of the rats in Alderney?
Well, look, rats.
Just everywhere.
They're foraging along the coastline, along the sea cliffs, especially so. Rat ecology is a bit interesting. So black rats, they're actually not present on Guernsey, black rats, and I don't think they have them on Jersey either. That's
God's sake,
that's
man.
because brown rats are big, beefy, scary things.
Okay, cool.
Black rats are a bit smaller. They're still they're still great predators, etc., and they're great climbers. But yeah, so black rats are actually better climbers than the brown rats. So in the UK, for example, black rats have only survived in like maritime areas, sea cliffs, ports, harbours. Everywhere else it's brown rats. We see the same here. So inland on Alderney, it's all brown rats. I'd expect them to be, around areas where there's chickens being fed. If anyone's got chickens, I'm sure they've had rat problems.
Near the Impo.
Near the Impo.
Or like near the recycling centre.
Rats will be anywhere where there's areas for them to hide. So especially big piles of stuff, be that compost heaps, rubbish piles, piles of wood, whatever, and where there's food.
Well, okay, so it's quite a challenge then to get rid of them.
Yeah, well, if you actually wanted to get rid of the rats, it's a serious project. And you'd also have to look at things like people keeping pets indoors while it's happening and things like that to make sure there's not any accidental bycatch.
Okay, well, we're not going to make any major changes on this podcast right now.
The positives of something like that would be huge.
Right, well, we can consider it, and we are in a changing times. But I love the fact that so the gannets and the puffins get along. Is that right? I
mean, they don't live in the same place. They don't hate.
They're neighbours.
So the puffins live on Baru, which is that low flat island, and they live in burrows. And then the gannets live on Lezitak and Ortak, which are cliffy. Gannets are pedestal nesters, so they build a big pedestal and they'll nest on that. The puffins, burrow nesters, so they dig a burrow. There is a very close relative of puffins called a guillemot, which does live right next to the gannets. Guillemots, they look very similar to a puffin, but they're a little bit bigger, and they've got a pointy beak instead of that kind of classic curved beak. And they will nest just on the kind of rocky cliff face next to the gannets. They tend to go in areas where it's a bit too small for the gannets, because if a gannet decides to nest there, they're big, scary buggers.
Got no choice.
Yeah.
So, but genuinely, do they get along? Do they if they're both next to each other, will they peck each other's eyes out?
Usually,
or they're chill?
They're okay, but gannets are feisty animals.
Really?
If you look at Lezitak or any gannet colony, you'll notice that all the nests are about pecking distance apart.
Right.
Because if you're a gannet and you get too close to another one, you're getting it. And it's not unusual to see a gannet with, one eye.
Wow.
For good reason.
Oh no. So there's gang wars and stuff going on with them.
Well, more like they pair for life, and they'll have their nest, and they are so defensive of that nest because that's their chick, that's their livelihood, that's everything.
What? They're monogamous.
Yeah,
they're completely monogamous birds.
Most seabirds are, so puffins are as well.
Although
there is a divorce rate, which is I think it's something like 10% or so. It's not nothing. But yeah, so seabirds. I think we were talking about it off air earlier. They have a life cycle where they invest very, very heavily in a low number of chicks. So for gannets and puffins, it's one a year. So each of those have one chick a year. And what goes often with that kind of life cycle is you also invest in a partner. It's the same as what people do, right? We invest in a partner, and they'll do that, and they'll do that year after year after year after year. So gannets can live up to around 40 years. In fact, the oldest gannet is from Alderney. It was from Lezitak. It was 39 years old. 39 and 7 months, I think, when it died.
Wow.
That was unfortunately an avian flu, which we don't necessarily need to touch on, but there's probably older gannets out there as well. That's just the oldest we've found. And there's some seabirds like fulmar, which are getting over 50, and then you've got albatross, which are pushing 100. These seriously long-lived animals.
Interesting.
Seriously long-lived.
So, do you know which couples are together, like the gannet couples? Do you know like Ron and Marjorie or whatever? do you give them names? Is that a thing?
I don't. People usually, some people do definitely, but
Because they all look the same to me. I mean, like, all birds. I mean, I get their species, but you must observe them so much with your surveys and obviously your drone work, which gives you a much better understanding of the sizes and stuff. But do you see any any like couples?
well, you'll see. So they'll obviously always go back to the same nest, or often they'll go back to the same nest. So you'll know, oh, that's that pair. But you've touched on something that's really interesting about seabirds, in that the males and females, it's very hard to tell the difference. Really, really, really hard to tell the difference, right? Compare that to, say, a peacock.
Mm.
You know what a male peacock is, or a pheasant. It's so obvious, or a chicken, right? But that's probably because they are pairing for life. The males and females both have to display how healthy they are. So those things that a peacock has, like those feathers, right? They're what we call like a sexual display. So that's a peacock saying, the male peacock saying, look how healthy I am, look how healthy I am. It's a bit like a person buying a sports car, saying, look, I can waste loads of money on a sports car. I can rear kids, right? For a peacock, I can waste loads of energy on these feathers. Therefore, I'd make a good father for these chicks, right? It's come mate with me, right? But for a gannet or a puffin, the males and the females have to prove it. And that's because, unlike a peacock where the peahen does all the work, the male comes in, mates, and then buggers off. With a gannet and a puffin, those guys, they're pairing for life. They're both putting in a huge amount of energy. The males are putting a huge amount of work in as well. So the males and the females have to prove their worth. So, for a puffin, it's a great example. That bill they've got, both males and females have that. And that bill is saying, I've got loads of energy to spare. I can invest in this bright, colourful bill. Therefore, I can rear chicks. Come, marry me, essentially.
That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the size of a gannet. I mean, gannet's tiny, right? I mean, sorry. Puffins are tiny.
Yeah.
But they got a big old nose.
Yeah.
Have you got anything to show what it?
So in here's my box.
Alex has brought himself a box of box of tricks.
So actually, I'll start. Here's a gannet skull.
That's a gannet skull.
I don't know.
Wow. Yeah. Let me hold it up for the camera and see if you can see. See if you can see this. It's This is crazy. It looks almost. I mean, that is the pointy end.
Yeah, and you've got to remember that that's just the bone. Over that would be a sheath of like a keratin kind of material, the beak. So it would be longer and pointier.
That's incredible. So this is really like a spear that they're going to use to dive bomb. Into the water and hopefully hit the fish.
Yeah, catch the fish. Exactly.
But puffins are different. Puffins have a tiny little bill. Is that what you call it? A bill?
Yeah, a bill. So
it's the difference between a bill and a beak.
That is a puffin skull.
That's a puffin skull.
If you can see, compared to the gannet,
I feel kind of bad on it. This is like the famous Alderney puffin and the famous Alderney gannet. And they're both dead.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, so let me. Can I give you back the gannet one?
Yeah,
so I want to hold the puffin one. Oh my god, its jaw is just like opening. This is incredible. Look at this, guys. So this is. Oh my god, that is kind of creepy.
It is a little bit. Creepy.
It is a bit creepy, but that's tiny. For what you think a puffin is.
And even that bill is quite small when you see it. There, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I mean, really, how big is a puffin then? Just like
so, puffins, they're about that tall.
About the size of a pint glass.
Yeah, a little bit bigger, maybe a pint and a half.
Okay, this is very fragile. How did you get hold of these?
So, the puffin skull was found on the colony. It's a bird. It might have just got too old, or possibly been predated. The gannet skull was. I'm not sure exactly the provenance of this one, but almost certainly it's one that washed up here. Every year we'll have a couple of gannets wash up dead, because they've got old storms. It is sad, but we do live next to 15,000 gannets. It's not a surprise that every now and again one does die.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, but 15,000 gannets. No offense, gannets. I don't mind one or two of them dying. But to think that the puffins, there's so little of them.
Yeah.
What is the main threat to the gannets? I mean, apart from the fishing and having to go further away, but on Baru itself,
to the puffins, yeah.
What happens to the puffins?
So the main threats to the puffins, well, yeah. So like you said, it's fish availability is a really big one, and that slow creep of if they're not able to rear more young, it's an aging population, and eventually, if there aren't more young ones coming in, there'll be no one to replace them. So that is a big concern.
Bit like Alderney, isn't it?
Bit like Alderney, yeah. In terms of more like kind of acute threats, something that really affected them in the past was oil spills. So that's one thing that took the population from 40,000 down a lot was an oil spill.
No way, what, from like a
It
ship
was
or
Torrey
something?
Canyon. It's quite a famous one.
For
I think it
God's
was the
sake.
80s.
Where was that?
I think south coast of the UK, but there were some big ones in Wales as well. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but essentially in the region. And what happens is if it happens outside of the breeding season, these guys are all out at sea. They get caught, their feathers get gummed up in oil, and essentially they drown. And it can kill thousands and thousands and thousands of seabirds.
That sucks, man. I mean, look, I get it. I understand why, these things happen and no one wants an oil spill. But it's crazy to think that like human beings can have an accidental impact on the environment to a point where you can go from 40,000 puffins down to a couple of hundred.
Yeah. Well, it's like we were talking about, the kind of those things tipping the scales. And okay, if there was an oil spill, but fish stocks are being fine, and there hadn't been disturbance on the colony, so that's something else. It used to be the case where in the breeding season there used to be lots and lots of people going on Baru, even like tours going on Baru, and that almost certainly had an impact on their breeding success. If it was a case where you didn't have any of those other problems, population may well have recovered. And in fact, we're seeing potentially recovery with the ganets at the moment. So, 2022? So 3 years ago, there was avian flu. Avian flu hit seabirds for the first time, and it hit them really bad. Ganets in Alderney, we lost around 40%.
Jesus Christ.
We're talking thousands and thousands of birds. Like seriously bad.
So it was like COVID before COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after COVID.
Oh, it was
for
after
me,
COVID.
For me, I think
Of course
about
it was.
COVID, and I always think it's 2022. But I'm like,
Of
no,
course.
that
No,
was
it was 2020,
bird COVID,
wasn't it?
So
bird COVID came after our COVID.
it did, yeah. We
and
were just coming out of lockdown.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
go
Yeah,
in.
they didn't understand the
But
social
imagine
distancing.
it's no surprise that it was so bad for birds like gannets, where a gannet colony, it's a bit like a tube station or a football stadium. They're all in close next to each other. But since then, their productivity's okay. They're having lots of chicks, and there are some small increases in numbers. We're seeing new birds come in to breed, and that's because at the moment, although they are struggling a bit with fish, they're able to survive and they're able to recover because there aren't too many pressures piled onto them yet. There are other things coming which could affect them.
Okay, so tell me a bit more then about the sort of time of the year, because I know Baru. I mean, is Baru off limits now? Are you allowed to go?
Baru's open now.
So
You
what
have to request
months?
access through the harbour. So Baru shuts. Let me get this right. Mid-March. I think it's around the 14th of March. Baru will shut.
Puffins come back.
Puffins come back, and then they'll continue breeding. And their last chicks tend to fledge around the end of July. So Baru tends to open.
That's quite quick.
Yeah, it is fairly quick. And compare that to the gannets. Their chicks aren't fledged until September. There's a few fledging now, but most don't fledge until either mid-September, late September, or even some into October. Much longer.
Wow.
But things like puffins, because they're small and they're vulnerable, a lot of these smaller birds, they're keen to get them out to sea as quick as possible.
Of course.
So it's basically
okay. So the check-in date is around mid-March for the puffins.
Yeah, and if you want to come to Alderney and see puffins, which is definitely possible, the best way to do it is you'll need to get a boat trip, really. And there's a few different providers.
Which you guys do boat trips.
We
don't
do
you?
do boat trips, and I'd strongly encourage come join us for a boat trip. I used to do them. I don't so much anymore. But they'll be led by some of our great ecologists. Who they really are very good. They're great trips. And there are other I'll pretend to be the BBC, other good tour providers that also exist.
Is there? I don't know. I've only ever been with you. But it's fascinating when you do go out with the wildlife, because it's not just we go out to Baru or go out to Ganet Rock or whatever. It's like everywhere there's a bird flying. You're like, oh, yep, that's that bird. That's that bird, and like you get such an idea then about the world you live in. I didn't realize until I met you and you started educating me how special this island is for wildlife. I've just sort of grown up ignorant of it, which I think a lot of people just are ignorant, because if it's not something you're passionate about and you don't know, then you don't really care that much. And I'm not to say that like I've ever tried to hurt the wildlife or
Mm.
anything like that, but I've certainly never. Okay, apart from litter, I've got to admit, litter is my number one pet peeve.
Mm.
Which actually I feel a bit bad now because if I went onto Ganet Rock, I was like, nope, give me back that litter. And even though it's your nest. But yeah, you got to educate people if you wanna protect the things, and that's what your mission is. So,
But yeah, I think people only are going to protect the things they value and
mm,
help and understand. So yeah.
well, I certainly value being able to go out there on your tours as well. Okay, so we spoke a lot about the seabirds. Let's talk a little bit about the on island.
Hmm.
What do you call it when it's on island?
Usually
Ter-
terrestrial.
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 I keep
You
thinking
know,
you're talking about like
land
aliens or
animals.
something,
Yeah, yeah.
extraterrestrial.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah.
land animals on Alderney are fascinating. Just from the top of my head, blonde hedgehogs. That's that's basically all I can think of. What's special about Alderney's land animals?
Yeah, so like our marine life obviously is we're all connected in the sea, but as an island, we're not connected to any other land. So, like lots of islands around the world, we have a unique blend of animals, and that all depends on when Alderney was cut off after the last ice age. When the waters came back in and when it was cut off
Mad.
from the rest of the land, right? And that's why we'll even have different animals to Guernsey or Jersey. Jersey has lots more animals like different kinds of lizards and things like that we don't have because it was connected to land for longer. So we'll go through them. Mammals, we've got a couple of species of mice. An interesting one we do have is the greater white-toothed shrew. That's a species which they don't have in Guernsey or Jersey. They do have it in the Isles of Scilly. You can tell it's the white-toothed shrew because its teeth are white.
Cute.
Yeah, they
Aw.
have in Jersey and Guernsey they've got the lesser white-toothed shrew. So it's just this kind of strange, why do we have that one and they don't? We obviously have moles, which are another lovely mammal. No moles in Guernsey, but we do have moles here. In terms of other kind of mammal life, as you said, we have the hedgehogs. Whether or not they're native or not really sure, but they're
Yeah, I
probably
mean, what
naturalized.
is the story of the blonde hedgehog? Because are we talking just blonde hedgehogs, or do we have both? Brown
Yeah,
hedgehogs, blonde
so
hedgehogs.
blonde hedgehogs essentially are a leucistic form of brown hedgehogs, of normal hedgehogs. So they're exactly the same species, but they have a genetic, a modification in their genes, a bit like say how some people have blue eyes. Some hedgehogs are blonde. They're not albino, they're leucistic, so they don't have pigment in their skin, and they don't have pigment in their fur or spines, quills, whatever you want to call it, but they do have pigment in their eyes. So unlike an albino animal which has those pink eyes, these guys don't have that, so they don't have that associated problem with vision as well.
And we're unique in the sense that they're not on Guernsey, they're not on Jersey. I mean, there must be somewhere
There's
else
a
in the
couple.
world.
So yeah, they're not in the other Channel Islands. There are a couple of other places with some leucistic hedgehogs. I think there's a river. I think there's an island in the Seine actually, which has some, which is really strange. But it's not surprising really. They've evolved. They've kind of that traits become commonplace here because it's such a small population. And in small populations like that, you do get these kind of mutations can come to the front that you wouldn't necessarily see in a
Mm,
larger population just because of random chance. If there's 100 animals and 3 of them are leucistic, and half of them get killed by a bad winter, then suddenly that leucistic trait is much bigger. But in the UK, if there's 1 million animals and 10 of them are leucistic,
mad.
realistically that
So
trait's not
I
going to become
just
very
thought,
big.
so is like inbreeding a thing? Like obviously with a small island. I mean, I'm sure back in the day the humans were probably doing something dodgy, but I mean it's only dodgy compared to what we think now. But the idea that you're a bunch of hedgehogs, aren't you all just related?
Yeah, I'm sure there are problems. But yes, and there are. So if we were to, there's some kind of great statistical models that look at like the minimum size for a population to be able to make it viable. There's an interesting study I looked at that was about the last mammoths. For mammoths went extinct, and there was an island in, I think it was near Svalbard, and the last mammoths were this little remnant population on a small island, and they become basically incredibly inbred, and were probably really struggling by the end. That being said, hedgehogs bit different to mammoths. They're a
Yeah.
lot smaller. There's more of them here. So
Okay, so that's not a
it's hard
huge
to be
risk.
sure, but it's probably not a huge risk. That being said, after many years, you might eventually get problems occurring.
Well, I hope that the hedgehog colonies are
Yeah,
great.
I wouldn't say that it's a concern for now
How many
by a long way.
hedgehogs do you think we've got on Alderney?
Oh,
Is that
it's
hard
a
to
very
tell?
different difficult question to
Yeah,
ask.
because with the birds, you can look at the drone maps and you
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
literally,
There's
count
very
them.
standardized survey methods for birds in terms of like terrestrial as well. We've got a number of different surveys we do, and the seabirds, like you said, with the drone work. With hedgehogs, it's really hard. There's some people, a lady called Susie Weir here has been doing these kind of surveys for a number of years. I'm not sure how long exactly, but that's like counting numbers in gardens and sometimes walking along the roads and counting them. And from that, you might be able to tell if there's a change in abundance. So say if you had really low numbers all of a sudden, you might think something's happened, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell what the whole population is.
It must be
Um,
hard because they're underground as well, right? Are they
yeah.
underground?
Well, no, they're not underground, but they'll be in
Oh, I
like
see.
areas like, long tussocky grass,
Yeah.
things like that. It's blooming hard. The way they've tried to, there are a couple of papers that look at estimating Alderney's hedgehogs. I think they put them mostly around the kind of 1,500 mark to 500 mark. That's off the top of my head, so that might be slightly
Mm.
wrong, but basically there's big estimates because what they tend to do is they'll trap them or like monitor them in a small area of habitat and then they'll extrapolate it. They'll say, okay, in grasslands, we found 10 hedgehogs per, 100 meters. So therefore, in all grasslands, there are going to be 10 hedgehogs per 100 meters.
So it's not as accurate as the birds.
Yeah, well, I mean, some birds it's very hard to do as well. But yes, it's difficult to precise. It is difficult.
Well, I mean, you guys have cameras on the birds like all the time. It's
Hmm.
like Big Brother.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
But yeah, I guess so. So where do we go and find blonde hedgehogs? Because people are always saying to me when they come here, like, Cam, I want to go see a blonde hedgehog. Where's the most popular spot to find a blonde
Yeah,
hedgehog?
there's I think it depends if they're willing to stay out to the pub till 4 in the morning in
Yeah,
summer,
absolutely.
they'll
Why
probably see
not?
them anyway, as they walk home. But yeah, later is better, usually with hedgehogs. And whether you can see blondes or brown, I think it's kind of 50-50, maybe 60-40, blondes or brown. There's no place where you will see blondes versus browns. They're mixed, To a hedgehog, it doesn't seem like they give a damn
Right.
if you're blonde or brown. Something we should all learn from. But essentially, the best place to see them is anywhere with like short cropped grass. Because if you're in long crop grass, you ain't gonna see them. So going to places like the buttes, the cricket ground, the golf course, places like that. If you've got a torch, best if it's red light so that you're not disturbing them. But doing a sweep with a torch over areas like that after dusk, that's your best bet through
Wow.
summer.
And obviously we shouldn't touch them. That's always scared the hell out of me. I mean, are they prickly? Like, the spines, I'm guessing they're for defensive
Yeah,
purposes.
definitely. They're prickly. And if anyone's got a dog which has caught a hedgehog, sometimes the dog will be fine. Sometimes the dog is not fine.
Oh, wow, I never even thought about that.
It can cause injuries, and that's exactly what it's there for, is to keep predators off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they have any predators in Alderney, the hedgehogs?
No, at least not the adults. I suppose something like a rat would definitely take the babies, but I can't imagine
Aw.
it's a big problem.
Have you seen little baby
Um,
hedgehogs?
yeah, you call them hoglets.
Hoglets.
I've seen little ones. I haven't seen proper babies. I think they have. I'm not a hedgehog expert. I have to say. You've asked me to talk about things on land, which is already out of my comfort zone. But I think they build kind of a nest. Which the female will look after. And obviously, she's a mammal, so they'll feed off her milk for a while. They'll be dependent on her. Unlike
Aw.
other species, which they might just kind of tell them to bugger off. But
Oh no, I like
um,
asking you about the things on land because it's because I actually didn't know much about the stuff at sea. Yeah, because you're never at sea. I know about sort of a lot of things on land, and I have to admit, and this is really bad. I'm saying this on a podcast, but I accidentally killed a blonde hedgehog once. I reversed the car and I felt a little bump,
yeah,
and this poor thing, I had to have I dug a hole in the garden and I said a few words before quietly looking around and thinking, I hope no one's
yeah,
seen me doing this, because it's such an iconic thing for
yeah.
Alderney. Like, our blonde hedgehogs are
They are a
famous. And
charismatic species, aren't they?
they're
Yeah,
amazing. They're so sweet. Yeah. But that's nature. Sometimes accidents happens. But we do want people to help do their bit and protect all of the wildlife on Alderney. Is there any sort of immediate things that come to mind when you think about how the people of Alderney can really help preserve our nature?
yeah, for sure. And the obvious ones are like simple things like putting feed out for birds. Like bird feeders, especially if they're protected from cats. And fortunately, we don't have squirrels here, but Yeah, putting feed out for birds over winter can be really, really useful for those. Um, if you have, say, like if you're in the breeding season in particular, so that's like around March to midsummer. If you have, say, dogs and things like that, trying not to let them run loose through areas of long grass. Obviously, there's already problems areas of the beaches where you can't go. So I appreciate like there's not many areas dogs necessarily can go in the summer, but you will have birds breeding in areas with long grass, and dogs running through them can be a big problem. Obviously, cats is a contentious one to get onto the pet one, but I had a cat when I was younger. Um,
They bring all sorts back, don't they?
they bring all sorts back.
Trophies.
Trophies. Yeah, something to think about. In your own garden, you can look at things like wildflowers, planting wildflowers, diversifying your garden. So not just having a lawn and some flower beds on either side. You can, have different native species of plant, which can be, really, really beautiful. Ponds, digging a pond. I love ponds. I think they're brilliant. They attract so much wildlife. And if you've got, vegetables or flowers and you've got a problem with slugs, one of the other animals we have here are newts, and building a pond in your garden will attract newts. Newts love slugs,
Oh, that's
so
so sweet. I
what's
love
not
I
to
love
love?
newts. It's funny because you think, how the hell does a newt decide to go and find a new pond? Like, how does wildlife expand into new places? It's a miracle,
Yeah,
really.
it's a great question. I mean, um, if you walk around, especially in spring when the newts first come out of hibernation, and if it's rained, you walk around, you'll see them on the roads. You'll see them walking around, and I
Walking
think
through
it,
town,
yeah, literally,
looking for
literally
a new
walk.
place to live.
Yeah, that's how they'll spread out. You imagine after the like frog spawn, newts similar. So after all those babies are born, all of a sudden you've got 100 newts in one pond. They think, oh God, we've got to get out of it. It's too busy. So they do all
Wow.
literally radiate out.
Incredible. Well,
Yeah,
because and so obviously we've got the town is more of like the built up end of the island. And then I guess if you go to the east
like
of the
Longy
island,
way.
like Longeway, you've got the marshland type thing,
Yeah, and
and you've got
grassland,
the
yeah.
the bird sanctuary, is that what it's called, or a bird observation area?
There's like the bird
The
hides.
bird
So
hides,
so
that's
we
it.
have the trust manages a few nature reserves. So Longy is one of those. And that's done with like just agreement. We don't own any land. It's just done with agreements from the landowners, and from the states for some of the areas. And that essentially involves doing things like cutting bracken where it's becoming dominant, or we have the grazing cattle, which help to maintain, the grassland in a diverse state. Alderney used to be farmed. I think it's important to understand that historical context. Alderney used to be farmed over a lot of the island, right? Um, and that meant that we kept a kind of gentle grazing pressure on the whole of the island. It wasn't woodland. We got rid of the woodland a couple of thousand years ago. Um, but it was probably quite diverse grassland because it was that gentle grazing from people with like, a small number of livestock each, right? Since the war, um, obviously most of that grazing has gone. You have grazing on Kiln Farm, and there's the pigs, but other than that, there's really very little, and like obviously a couple of small holdings, but
And a few goats.
yeah, a few goats.
Some sort of
Exactly,
random
exactly.
goats kicking
Other than
about.
that, there's very little livestock or grazing. And you imagine, of course, in a native system, in like a wild system, we may well have had some kind of native grazer, like an auroch, which was a wild cow,
Wow.
or wild goats, or deer or boar, or things like that. We may not have because we're a small island, but we may well have. And it's that gentle grazing pressure helps maintain these habitats, because without it, if you don't mow your lawn for ages, what happens? You get brambles, and that's what happens out in the wild too. Is things like brambles and scrub, they'll slowly come to dominate. So all that lovely grassland would turn from grassland into like a monoculture of types of scrub. So blackthorn,
Ooh.
bramble. In the right balance, we want that. In the right balance, that's great for wildlife. It's nesting habitat for birds.
Mm.
Mammals like it. There's food available from it, but not at the same time losing all of the grassland. So a lot of the work that our like a kind of Action for Nature team does is they maintain and where possible kind of improve those habitats.
Yeah, no one likes brambles. I've fallen in a few of the brambles on Alderney, and yeah, no, we've got enough brambles. Okay, so where else is the sort of natural nature reserve? So you've got Longy,
Yep.
that's
So
a
there's
great
Longy,
area
which includes the bay, and then around to Manet over the other side as well, and that east coast.
where
Um,
we've now got the tarmacking area.
yeah, I think it's just
That's a bit crazy.
yeah, it's just the reserve itself. I think mostly
Near the
loops
mini
around.
railway.
Yeah, it loops around the railway because there's not an
Right.
agreement with them. But yeah, I'll stay away from that for the moment. But
Okay, and then further
yeah.
down the island towards like the tennis courts, is that
Yeah,
another area?
so that's actually almost pushing into the Ramsar site.
Mm.
Down the tennis courts, you've got Platzeline Common. That's not managed by the trust. That's managed by the states
Oh
of
wow.
Alderney, in the same way that Bray Common is managed by the states of Alderney, and they do a really really great job actually. The land, the states works department, they do a really good job. What's I think actually, so we had a cruise ship tour the other week, and we took them past there, and that's one of the main areas I pointed out because I think what's really amazing about that is the change. If people remember a few years ago, Platzeline was this tiny little pond in the spring, and in summer it was dry.
Yeah,
Right
I remember that.
now, that's completely changed. That's because we've stopped taking water from the stream in the Bonterre, which is a stream above Platzeline, and it's allowed this big marshland area to develop, which is probably pretty much the second largest natural body of fresh water on Alderney now. And
Mm.
when you walk down there, you've got loads of mallards breeding. There are loads of ducklings there this year. There's more hens breeding. We've had water rail there in the past. You know, you walk down there, there's hundreds of swallows and martins feeding over it. You know, that's all animals that had they weren't there before. You know, they probably wouldn't have, they might have not even been on the island.
That's amazing, isn't
But
it?
just that one little change, and that's an amazing habitat
So
that's been
where's
created.
the other big one? Big pond.
So there's the others are really the quarries.
Mm.
There's Manet Quarry, which is near the Odeon. Not far from the Odeon. There's Manet Quarry. That's got bulrush. Actually, I think that's where this is from. I've
So
got another
more
one.
props.
I've got another prop.
Oh my god,
There we
what
go.
is that?
So this is a bit fragile.
Oh my
If
god.
you hold both the
Can I
sticks
hold
like
it
that.
here?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my god, guys, look at this. It's like chopsticks, but this is a bird nest, is it?
Yeah. So
That's incredible.
that's a nest which was taken from Manet Pond during some annual clearance in the winter. So every winter, to stop the bulrushes taking over the pond, and keep that diversity up, they're cut back, right? Because obviously, again, in the wild space, you would have had a big cow or something come through and eat it, but we don't have that. And that's a nest which has been built by a little bird called a reed warbler. So reed warblers, beautiful little birds.
Wow, and it's got live moss growing on it.
Yeah, so you can see it's picked little bits of moss from, you know, the banks, from trees, whatever, and it's built this little nest. I don't know if you can show people, but there's a really lovely, on just in the top, this almost like cup.
Yeah,
where the eggs
it
would have
looks
been.
like a little cream egg could just sit inside there, or a proper egg,
or a proper egg, yeah.
So a little egg goes in that.
Yeah, a little egg, and they'll build. You know, they would have built a new one the next year.
Right,
know,
and so and so then this was obviously found after. It's just an abandoned nest, really,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly. Yeah.
And what do these birds look like? Are they small, big?
Reed warblers are really small. They're
Tiny.
a blooming nightmare to identify. You know, essentially, you call them. I'm not really a bird specialist. That's not my background. But if you're a birdie, you might call a brown like that an LBJ, or a little brown job.
A
Which
little
basically just
brown
means
job.
a little brown bird. Oh, blooming it! What was that? It just flew past really fast.
Real quick.
But reed warblers, what they do have, you know, it's clues in the name, warbling. They've got a very distinctive song. Sounds quite scratchy. You can use these days. They're not a fail-safe, but if people out there are interested in birdsong, there's some really good apps. One in particular called Merlin. There's another one called BirdNet.
Oh wow! So it can identify.
It can identify them.
It's like Shazam for birds.
Yeah, like Shazam for birds, exactly. So you can, you know, record it yourself, and then it will identify what birds are in the area. It's not fail-safe, you know, because sometimes it will get it wrong.
Of course.
And obviously, there's no substitute for having that knowledge yourself. But it's a brilliant tool. And these things are only going to get better. You know, it uses AI. So.
What kind of other apps are you using now? Because I mean, yeah, you must use loads of apps to do this stuff.
Yeah. So we also have. There's a couple of apps called iRecord and iNaturalist. We don't tend to use these for ID. You can, but what we usually use these for is submitting records. So say, I'm out on the beach and I see an ormer, I see an ormer, um, in a place, whatever, where unusual or normal to see them. I can take a photo of it. I can then go on my iRecord app. I put that photo on it. I say I was at Clonk on this date. I saw this ormer, and I might make a note. I might say, oh, and it had a tag. It was tag A831. That then goes off whoosh, into a national database across the whole of the UK. It will feed back into the Alderney Record Centre as well. And then if anyone ever wants to look at like where ormers are found in the country, your little record will be there. That ormers
Wow.
are there. And you can do the same for, plants and, loads of different things like
So
that.
everyone can get involved.
Yeah, everyone can get involved.
What's the name of this app then? iRecord?
So there's a couple. There's iNaturalist. So iNaturalist, like, Darwin naturalist. And then there's iRecord as well.
Which one would you like people to use?
Most of my colleagues would say iNaturalist. They prefer it. I prefer iRecord.
Are they all part of the same database though? Would they all?
Yeah, so they'll all submit to the same. The
That's
main
cool.
difference, so there's the main difference between the two is that iNaturalist, I think you like submit your records and then lots of people can comment and say if they agree if you were correct in identifying it,
great.
which is like sounds it, but it's actually very useful.
Yeah,
Because,
of course.
often like we'll submit records and we'll go, I think it's this, especially if it's something in the marine world where some of these things you need a microscope to ID
Yeah,
them.
yeah, of course.
And you might only ID it to kind of a genus level. So you'll say it's part of that family. Bit like IDing us and say, oh, it's a kind of monkey, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, yeah.
So that can be very useful. iRecord is a bit different. It doesn't have that like community side of things. You'll just get a verifier will come through and they'll say yes or no. And they'll give you an explanation.
So you prefer iRecord probably because it's quicker.
To be honest,
and
I prefer iRecord because it was the one I downloaded first.
Classic. That's absolutely classic.
I think iNaturalist probably has some merits.
Okay,
but,
well, I'm gonna download it after this. So I'm gonna start taking part.
And so when you do that, it'll go to the national databases like the National Biodiversity Centre. Then we've set up, and it's been a long time coming and there's been work going on for a number of years, but one of my colleagues, Matt, has done a lot of work on this, and we've got an Alderney Record Centre. So that then gathers in all of the data which is coming from the UK about Alderney and gathers it back up for Alderney. So if, say, you're interested in, how many owls have been seen here, you could send a request to the Alderney Record Centre and we'd be able to tell you how many owls where they were. Only thing being said, if it's a sensitive species, sensitive records are sometimes protected.
Hidden in the hidden files.
Like a peregrine falcon nest or whatever.
Oh, wow.
People still, unfortunately, like to nick eggs sometimes.
Really? Okay, so do we have falcons in Alderney?
We've got a few species of falcon. So we've got
big birds.
Some big, some very little. So we've got kestrels, which are the small ones you see hovering, beautiful orange, kind of rusty colored back, really beautiful birds, and they hover. So if you see a small bird, medium to small bird hovering, it's going to be a kestrel. We then have peregrine falcons.
Cool.
Peregrines, incredible, fastest animal in the world. I think it's something like 250 miles an hour. They go maybe a bit faster.
And they dive bomb just like the gannets.
Yeah.
But don't obviously.
But they don't
hit
get
the
to
ground.
see. They catch stuff, so they are amazing. And yeah, amazing predators. You'll see them if you walk the south coast or anywhere. To be honest, you'll see peregrines. They're here all year round.
I love that. So proper Alderney birds.
Yeah. And then we've got a number of other birds of prey. So we have sparrowhawks as well, which aren't a true falcon, but they're very similar. They just evolved from a different group of birds.
Mm-hmm.
Sparrowhawks are like the velociraptor of the bird world, right? So they've got shorter wings. And they'll even chase stuff by running. What they're built for is chasing small birds through like wood and undergrowth.
Oh no!
So if you're sitting in your garden, looking at birds on a bird feeder, and a bird comes through and takes a small bird, and it's come from like the side, especially, good chance it's a sparrowhawk.
That's kind of cool.
It might seem sad, but it's kind of cool.
It's nature, man.
And the thing is, those. When we talk about like predators in nature, they tend, sometimes they will take the fittest birds, as in the healthiest, but usually they're going to take the weak ones. They're going to take the young ones that aren't just cut out for it. And it's all part of that natural balance. And they do tend to keep populations healthy as long as there aren't other pressures, meaning that these birds are already really struggling. But yeah. I think if you ever see a sparrow in your garden, it's a privilege.
Well, all life is precious, but some is just stronger, and
Yeah.
that's natural selection, really,
Yeah.
isn't it? And I'm guessing because I mean, there's a few weak rabbits I see over here. I feel kind of sorry for the rabbits sometimes because I mean, yeah, tell me about the rabbit population here. I mean, some of them have got blindness or myxomatosis or something. What's
Yeah,
going on with the
so
rabbits?
mixed mitosis. Rabbits again, they are one of our larger mammals. They again might not be native. Probably brought here by the Romans, but they are definitely naturalized. So they've been here for so long that they're almost part of that natural ecosystem. And they might, in some ways, they might be quite important because we've talked a bit about how there's not any big grazers. Rabbits are grazers, so they are putting
Mm.
grazing pressure. They're stopping things becoming scrub in their own little way, right? Um, Myxomatosis is a disease. It was originally probably released in France by a landowner who wanted to control rabbits on their property. Um, it then was subsequently a few years later released in the UK, and it eventually made its way to Alderney. I'm not sure the exact dates. I think it was around the 80s, but that's from the
I mean,
dredges of my mind.
is that still? I mean, is that still bad though? I mean,
So
what's the?
yeah, Mixie's not gonna kill them all. But what we see is every few years, Mixie will become more prevalent.
It's
Myxomatosis.
just horrible, though, isn't it? Like
It is.
you
It
just, I
is a
mean, they're just
really horrible
blind. They
disease.
can't see shit.
Yeah.
You're just like running across the road
Yeah.
and you'll hit them
Yeah.
because they can't see you even coming.
Yeah.
You know.
It is a really horrible disease. I mean, thankfully, it was very prevalent in 2022, and the rabbit population went down a bit. But at least I haven't seen much Mixie since then. But these things come in cycles, and it will
Mm.
undoubtedly come back. That being said, the more the more times this happens, Mixie will probably become less lethal. Diseases tend to become less lethal over time. Look at things like COVID. The really lethal strains are often right at the start, and as it gets into more and more and more hosts, it's actually advantageous for these diseases if they don't kill their hosts, if they
Mm.
just go through them like the common cold. So hopefully over time, Mixie 2 might become less lethal. I'm not a virologist, so
That's
I
another
can't give too
ologist that
much.
we
Yeah,
have to get on the show.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, tell me a bit more about then the team behind the Alderney Wildlife Trust because there's a lot of you. You're all fairly young,
Mm.
which is really inspiring because you make up a large majority of our youth over here. But you all seem like you've got different jobs.
Yeah, yeah. So we split our work. I think it might be a good idea to split it into like the business as a whole, or charity as a whole, really. We have a kind of three overarching like campaigns. It's the way we've split our work into in our business plan. When I first got here, that wasn't really the case, but as a charity, we've kind of tried to mature a bit, if that makes sense, and have a bit more structure to what we're trying to do. So the first one of these is putting nature into recovery. So that's a lot of what I do, and that's working to understand what's going on in nature and in our wild spaces, and then the overall aim is to see like lots of our islands wildlife getting better. Not
Mm.
just stopping the decline, but making it better. And so that's a lot of work, and we've got a few people who work on that team. So I work as part of that. We've also got Dr. Mel, who leads the marine effort, who I'm sure lots of people here will be familiar with. We've got Tara Cox, Dr. Tara Cox, who leads the State of Nature project. So the Alderney State of Nature project is a project within that campaign, and that's a flagship program for us. And it's basically what it's done is it's identified the key species and the key habitats for Alderney. So it's used things like population data and whether or not certain species are protected in different red lists or listed as important in European lists, UK lists, Irish lists, Guernsey lists, whatever, and also public opinion. So last year they did a big public engagement survey and asked people on the island, what the most important animals were to them here, what the most important plants were, what the most important kind of wild spaces were to them. And from that, they get a list of what the kind of key species and habitats are. And then that advises us in, okay, these are our most important ones. So we're going to focus our work on those instead of just doing it vibes based and going, well, we kind of think puffins are important. It's kind of the idea is to kind of come up with some evidence behind that. And
Mm.
unsurprisingly, puffins did come up as quite
Of
important.
course, absolutely.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
whoever didn't write puffins in their survey, I need
yeah.
their contact details
So
right now.
so we've got that team. We've also got the reserves team. So that's Poppy and George mostly, and obviously Roland does a huge amount of work with them as well. Although mostly these days he's got so much management time as well. So they're doing things like tract cutting, cutting bracken, planting trees, clearing out those reed beds at the end of the year, maintaining the bird hides. Also a huge amount of work maintaining footpaths around the islands. The trust maintains a
Hmm.
lot of the footpaths that you'll see around Alderney, and maintaining some of the bunkers. Of course, I shouldn't neglect to mention, but the huge number of volunteers as well, especially with that kind of action team. They're out there every Wednesday, every Saturday, doing a huge amount of work, and of course the volunteers like your mum who are there in our shop,
Oh, bless her.
giving us a huge amount of support in the office, which does make a huge difference. But yeah, in that action team, we've got a number of volunteers who come out and they like hitting trees, hitting brambles with scythes. So
I
what's
have
not to
seen.
love?
I mean, I love the fact that you guys use social media. Like you're very active on social media. You really keep people entertained. It really is. It's fun to see all this kind of stuff. What can people do to get involved then? Like, how would you want people to approach you, and what can they do?
Yeah. So if you want to get involved, there's a number of different ways. So firstly, the easiest thing is just to either drop us a message on Facebook, or you can pop into the shop and say, "Look, I want to get involved. I'm not sure, not sure what I can do, but I'm interested in stuff," and then we can find something that might work for you. But some of the things we can do are, we have our conservation volunteers. That's every Wednesday and every Saturday, and they go out there and they're helping clear the footpaths. They're helping. You one week you might be painting bird hide. The next week you might be there with a scythe, or if you've got the ticket, a chainsaw. Kind of
Wow.
having a go at some invasive species, or pulling out sour fig on some sand dunes or whatever. Um, we've then got a number of people who obviously help us in the shop. So that's on the desk, and that's talking to people, to members of the public. That's helping us with, just running that
So
admin side.
there's quite a lot that people on the island can do.
Yeah.
I think it's really great, this idea of using the app. Is it iNature?
I so there's iNaturalist
iNaturalist.
or
I'm like,
iRecord.
you've already sold me that one as the better one. It's almost like Pokemon Go
Yeah.
when that was a thing.
Yeah.
Because I think if you gamify, the problem that you guys are trying to solve,
Mm.
and get the rest of the public involved in it, then hell, let's go, man. Let's go and capture all of the species and stuff. Look, I want to kind of move on slightly, because we've got a few more things in this box, and I mean, this thing here looks like a Rice Krispie, and I really want to encourage anyone that is interested in what the Wildlife Trust do to go and see in their shop, because this little Rice Krispie thing, I don't know if you can see it on camera at the moment. It does look like a Rice Krispie, but this is apparently an egg.
Yeah.
How the hell do you get your hands on all this stuff, man? Like, is this something else that people can do? If they find things on the beaches and stuff like this, can they just bring them in to
Yeah, for
have you
sure.
identify them?
Oh yeah, by all means. A lot of often we'll have people coming in, especially in summer, coming in and asking what these things are. This in particular is lots and lots of eggs. Actually, there's probably thousands of eggs in this. Each one of
Damn.
these little packets contains lots of eggs, and they're eggs of a type of snail, marine snail called a whelk.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
but they'll wash up on the beaches. You'll find them all over the place.
That's
All these
mad.
things I've got here, a lot of them are things we've found, but they've actually all been collated by our outreach officer Tan. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, a lot of what the trust does is that science work and that conservation work, but the other side of it is a huge amount of education and a huge amount of outreach. So
Well, thank you, Tan,
yeah,
and
so
everyone
Tan,
involved,
well,
really.
for that it's Tan and Abby who do that, and they'll do things like running forest school sessions through the summer. So that's a little bit like Scouts maybe, but it's like a learning
Oh,
environment, but in the forest, and also a version of that for the beach as well. Tan also goes to the play group every week and does sessions with them, and I think that's so important, is that education side really can't be understated as how important is it. I wouldn't be here now if I hadn't been engaged with nature at a young age, and it's the dream really to be able to, in 15 years time, have people working for the Wildlife Trust or working for nature, in any sense in Alderney, who've grown up on Alderney.
Mm.
and have that, we want to kind of equip them with those skills and that interest at a young age to come back and then engage again with nature when they're older.
I think it's fantastic, man. I mean, I love your passion for nature and I love your passion for Alderney. And that's the thing is I always find that there's champions on this island who probably don't know they're championing something, but I mean they love this thing and they don't realize why people always give them so much credit for something great. But there's a lot of people who do this, which makes this overall feeling that
Mm.
Alderney is a great place. So I really do appreciate what you're doing. There's one more thing that made me kind of
Yeah,
hungry
yeah, yeah.
earlier when I saw this. I'm gonna be very careful with this. This looks like something I should put on a barbecue. But I believe, what is this?
So that is a spiny lobster or a crawfish, or some people call it a crayfish.
Okay.
It's a baby, so this
Oh
is the
my
shell.
God.
This is the shell of a really small one. And it would have grown and got much bigger. If you see, it's very fragile, which is why it's just in a box here.
I'm amazed
But,
that you can even,
yeah,
hold it.
this was actually picked up by a diver and given to us.
Oh, sweet.
If you see, it's got these kind of long feelers. They would have been this long
Oh,
in
wow.
life.
So small body.
Yeah, it's small body, but this is curled around this shell. Adult, they're around the size of a lobster. They're a
Excellent.
type of
That's
lobster.
what I
They're
want to
big.
hear, my friend.
But with these guys, they were very common in our waters.
Not so much
going
anymore.
back 100 years ago or so, and because they tasted good, they got hunted out.
Oh, damn it.
And they disappeared completely, and you would be gobsmacked if you ever saw one here. In the last 5 years, though, because people stopped fishing them because there weren't enough to commercially fish for, and in the UK they put protections in which meant you couldn't fish for them, they've started to return. And I mean, this is obviously a real baby, but it's a brilliant sign that we're starting to see these crawfish again in our waters. Not just, I think they're a charismatic species and I like seeing them. But that's a sign of a bigger bit of hope, really, that if we give these marine ecosystems a space to breathe, they can recover. They can improve. Look at like the tuna coming back in. Yes, some of that might be coming back with warmer water, but a lot of it is just we haven't been hunting them commercially for a long time now. And that's allowed them to come back in, and they're slotting back into that niche in the ecosystem they filled before that was missing before. If you took a car and you took the screen wash out of it, okay, it might work all right for a bit, but your window's going to get really dirty because that key part of it's being removed, and that's a bit like what's happened in some ecosystems with these key species being taken out. And it might seem like everything's okay, but actually there's underlying issues. So it's really nice to see things coming back.
I really think this is fascinating. The idea of creating a sustainable ecosystem. It might not have been something that was that important, like a while ago, but then we had mistakes, and now we have to try and learn from those mistakes and try and.
And I think, I'm interested in like geopolitics, and there are a number of huge issues, right, facing the world at the moment. Huge issues. Not necessarily. They don't necessarily appear to be about climate on the surface. You've got whatever, like problems with food security. You've got, obviously, a lot of people are very concerned about refugees at the moment. You've got lots of wars and political instability. Thing is, climate is related to all of these things, and if we don't combat the climate crisis, and that's not necessarily an Alderney, I'm not expecting Alderney to come up with a solution, but if as a whole, if we don't combat the climate crisis, these problems are going to get worse. And in 50 years' time, we talk about rising sea levels. People say, what if the sea levels rise? It's okay. Islands are going to go underwater, but more importantly, it's not necessarily about that. It's about rainfall's going to change. Suddenly, you're going to have millions of people in parts of the world, and they can't grow food where they used to be able to grow food, and you'll have populations of people who have to move, and the world's going to get a lot more difficult and a lot more cramped.
It's tough though, because I don't think people ever associate their food with the farm anymore. Like, I don't think they have any idea where it comes from. We all think that someone else is doing it, and quite frankly, I think people are just a lot less concerned because they're distracted doing this and they're distracted doing that. I mean, the one thing I've always loved about Alderney is that because we're 2,000 people, and we could definitely do with some more people for sure, but we're a small island, and like, if I said to you, Alex, mate, should we go take over Downing Street and like go and run this, the UK properly? You go, no, mate, you get shot. You go here, yeah, mate. Should we just go down pub and talk to the states members and try and figure things
Mm.
out. It's like, yeah, let's do it. So you can literally make an impact on a small island in a
Yeah.
much bigger way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're doing is that you're proving, to the people in Alderney what we should and shouldn't care about. So I'm really encouraging of everything that you're doing, all the sort of suggestions as well, because I know as well that you're working with potential renewable solutions as well. That's always a big opportunity for Alderney, and one that, as you stated, with the geopolitical landscape, it's like if the fuel prices go up, Alderney's going to pay the price. And how
Yeah.
much longer can we keep importing diesel to power our lights? And that's really like it's scary for me because maybe not now, but in like 10 years' time, we're going to have a fuel crisis that we
Yeah.
can't afford to
Yeah.
pay global fees. So the idea that the states are now working with renewable energy companies and seeing ways to harness the tide and the wind and the solar, you guys are part of that. You're helping with the ecological studies and making sure that they're not going to affect the environment.
Mm.
And you play a massive big part of that. How do you feel about the renewables in Alderney? You must have had a lot of
Yeah.
meetings now.
Yeah. So I think renewables have to be a part of this island's future. They do, whether that's small scale, big scale, whatever. Like you said, the security of fuel is we're absurdly vulnerable here. We're absurdly vulnerable because we've got to import the fuel, and we have to do everything on island. If we could diversify our energy production, that's brilliant. And if we can do it in a renewable way, fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's also there are potential commercial benefits for the island in the long term. If certain renewable things like tidal went well, then maybe there would be potential for like capital
Yeah, for sure.
on
I
Alderney.
remember going to the island of Skye, was it? Or no, Gia in Scotland with Old Electricity. And, the fund that they had from their renewable energy was giving grants for people to move there. So you think about Alderney, like, okay, so we know we need young people to move here and families.
Yeah,
What if we just gave them 5, 10 grand and said, move to Alderney?
yeah,
It's like, well, we can't afford it now, but actually if we did harness, our own renewable energy, maybe that can all happen. It's very exciting though, isn't it? I mean, like it feels to me that there's a new generation of states members, there's young people who are getting obsessed about their thing.
mm,
And all you really need is some person to tie everyone together and get everyone working towards the same goal. But ultimately, I think that's kind of what's nice is that we are all doing it, and I'm just very happy that I get to document that, this kind of stuff in my own little way. I mean, I think bringing the community together by interviewing people, and I love people come up to me saying, "Oh, I didn't know about this, didn't know about this person," because it feels like in the past we've all been hidden from each other. We've been very close. You can go and see your neighbor, but there's a lot of rivalries and a lot of bad blood and all this kind of stuff. And I think communication is the only way to go forward. I think if you don't talk to each other, like that's bad. So whatever future Alderney's going to have, I think it's about working together. And you guys at the Wildlife Trust have just shown that with passion and energy and communication.
mm.
I think we're all getting really involved in it now. I know my mum loves working in the shop because she has people come up to her asking her questions about the wildlife, and my mum is like the least understanding person. I think someone said to her, "What's this type of mosquito?" And my mum said, "The only good mosquito is a dead mosquito." And the guy did not seem happy at all about that. But you know what? It's okay. It is okay. I guess lastly, I mean, how do you feel about eating animals? Are you
Yeah, well,
are you a meat eater or?
I am. I do eat meat. I do eat fish. A lot of my colleagues don't. Um,
We're not gonna
yeah,
have any judgment on that because
yeah,
that is another issue.
yeah, and if it's a good way to reduce your carbon if you don't eat meat. What I would say here is places like Kiln Farm.
Oh,
Obviously, it's all on island, so that's a bit different. That being said, I definitely have a lot of meat that's not from Ireland, but
of
but
course.
I mean, there are ways you can eat more sustainably, and I think whether or not you look at it as like an ethical issue, changing your diet and looking at your diet, and not necessarily cutting out meat or whatever. I haven't, but if you can reduce your meat intake, you can be healthier, and it can have a really positive impact. It might seem
Mm.
sometimes as well like, oh, but I'm only doing a little thing. But if everyone does a little thing,
Oh, I
that's a big
understand that.
thing,
The
right?
problem living on Alderney is that you've got so many nice restaurants, and like if you go to the Georgian or you go to the Blonde or something, and
Mm,
you have a steak from Kiln Farm,
yeah.
it's just beautiful compared to like steak. I've gone to nice steakhouses in London or whatever, and it's not as nice as the steak I have
Yeah,
here.
and I think kiln farms are a nice example of how you can choose to eat sustainably because it is local. You know, it's
Mm.
there's no food miles on it. So I wouldn't say like don't. Yeah, I wouldn't say you need to cut out that. I wouldn't say you need to cut out anything. But if you
Hell
were going to
no,
make like
yeah.
a sensible choice, you might look at something that's been imported from Brazil and say, okay, maybe I won't buy the prime cut from Brazil. I'll go and buy a kiln farm steak. You know.
And the pigs. Mother Samantha has been cooking up some piglets. I mean pigs.
Hmm.
I mean I guess. Anyway, I mean the problem is that they're all so cute as well. And you walk past them, and you walk past the cows, and you walk past the pigs, and then you're sitting there and you're eating them, and you're like, circle of life. Hakuna Matata,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a wonderful phrase.
I won't stray too far into the kind of that side of things. It's something that I definitely feel like I struggle with sometimes. But
Well,
anyway.
tell me what do you enjoy about living on Alderney? Because apart from your work, which I know what obsessive people are like, we work all the time.
Mm.
What do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, so I know I think part of it is I love like the wild spaces here, and it is a beautiful place to be able to step out your front door and go into nature. I think the history here is brilliant as well. Shouldn't be understated. You know, I walk out my front door. You know, I go down to Longy Bay, and I've got like 2,000 years of history surrounding me. But I think really what's great about Alderney is the community. You know, it's easy to make great friends here. Everyone's very welcoming, of course. I mean, I'm part of the rugby club. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy doing sports here, and it's something, you know, I think it's a bit easier in some ways to get into it here than it might be in the UK. And yeah, just that general sense of community is really nice about living in Alderney. Yeah.
Okay, what about nightlife? What do you get up to?
Oh, I used to be a bit more. Used to love the cat when I was first here. Used to love the karaoke in the chaise on a
Oh,
Sunday. But I used to work at the Georgian, so that was you go down with all of them, but not so much anymore.
oh the
I quite like I like a pub night or like a nice
yeah.
night. But yeah.
No, do you know what I mean? The Georgian lot are it's terrible. I mean, every year, like it's a roll of the dice to see what kind of personalities you get in the people that work at the
No
Georgian.
comment.
Because some years it's a bit quieter, and in other years you go, oh my god,
Yeah, for sure.
and the party scene is just it's crazy.
Yeah, I
There's
love
something.
the live music as well. It's brilliant, and
We're
yeah.
so lucky, aren't we? I mean, for some reason, we have some of the best musicians
Mm.
like ever. I know that Sam Pycroft used to be part of a band that was like signed by record label and stuff, and now he's just here slamming the electric guitar, and you're like, oh, okay, we're lucky to have that. But that's kind of the things it's all on our doorstep, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And well, look, I mean, is there anything else that you want to cover? Because I mean, I'm so excited to get more involved in the wildlife. I'll be honest with you, I've never even drifted into your shop without going in to see my mum.
Mm.
And so I'd really like to take part more, and I'd like others to take part
Yeah,
as
so
well.
something else I could talk about is we talked a bit about like what volunteers can do, and I mentioned like CVs, which is doing hitting stuff and building stuff. I mentioned desk volunteers, which is that administration time talking to people, but we also have citizen scientists. So later today, I'm going to be going out on an ormer survey. So our ormers, we go out there and we do these standardized surveys where we look under lots of rocks and we tag them. But that's a survey we do with our volunteers. So a lot of our marine surveys in particular, we have lots of a group of volunteers we call our marine group who'll come out and join us. And I think it's a great learning opportunity. You can learn, what's out there on our seashores. And it's fun.
It's like
I
a little
enjoy
treasure
doing them.
hunt.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we'll go for a
Wow.
coffee afterwards and
Oh, lovely.
whatever.
So
But
when do you do that?
so on spring tides. So we'll do them when the tides are at their lowest, and then we have ormer surveys. We have some crab surveys where we look at species of crab because there's been some really interesting things going on with our crabs in the last few years.
Like this
Yeah,
this is a
so
crab. Look, oh my, this is too delicate for me. I
no,
feel.
I mean you could hit this pretty hard. It's pretty tough. That's
What,
a spider crab,
that looks
carapace.
huge.
Yeah, so they are big fellas. These, this would have washed up on one of the beaches here. Tends to be you'd find these. You might see these if you went swimming or snorkeling, especially in places like corblets. You'll see them
I'm like, that's
fairly
your bag,
frequently.
not mine, man.
Yeah.
Like, if I saw that underwater, I'm like, get away.
But to be fair, the spider crabs, the crabs are really interesting. So I'm
Big
actually I'm
legs.
going to a conference next week, and I'm presenting on one of the surveys that we've been doing with our citizen scientists, and I'm going to a conference in the UK and presenting the results from that.
Oh,
Actually, tomorrow
wow.
I'm going to show that presentation to the citizen
Oh,
scientists.
exciting.
But it's really interesting. We've got a new species have come in because of warming temperatures. A new species has turned up called furrowed crabs. A lot of people, if they've been out on the shore, might have seen these guys. They've got kind of the carapace almost looks like a furrowed brow on someone's forehead. So these guys have come in, and their numbers have shot up, increased in the last few years to the point where, and I was looking at it, in 2022, to find one of these on average, you had to look under kind of 3 rocks, right? We can tell this from our data. Now you'll find more than one under every single rock.
Oh, that's
on
good.
average, right? Compare that to green shore crabs. Green shore crabs are a native crab, and in, what was it, 2022, you had to look under 11 rocks, right, to be confident you'd find one. 11, okay? By 2023, it was 20 rocks. You had to find one.
Oh, that's not good.
By 2024, it's 90.
Oh, no.
90 rocks. And in 2025, we haven't found a single green shore crab outside of areas where they had fresh water. So in most of your rocky shore, we're not seeing them at all now. Why that changes, it's still too early to tell.
Damn. So if anyone's seen a green crab.
Yeah. So that's a great example of, we then can look on those databases, and if people have seen one of those crabs and they've taken a photo of it, they've said, I was at this place on this day and I saw this green shore crab. That is so useful.
Yeah.
Because knowing that actually they were there on this date can be amazing, especially if it's something that you see all the time and you think, oh, you never think about it. You see it all the time because, okay, what if they disappear?
Yeah.
Will we
Get
know they were
involved,
ever
guys.
there?
Do these apps identify them for you?
Some of them do. So
we do need some.
iNaturalist can help. Actually, both of them will give you, like, so if you put a picture in fact, if I got my phone,
like an AI search result type thing.
So they'll like, if you put a species in. So if we, maybe I can try and do.
Oh my god,
here.
could you do one of these ones?
Yeah. I could do one of these.
That's
do it with
brilliant.
The ormer.
Yeah, let's see if.
Actually, obviously, I won't submit this because it's dead ormer shell on desk in CamTalks.
Yeah, do you think it's going to know it's dead? Is it?
If we take a photo, it might struggle with an ormer, to be honest, because it's a bit.
Because I think that's the thing that would almost stop people from getting involved in and engaging in this mission, is actually not knowing what the bloody thing I'm looking at is.
But you've got apps now which can really help you with that. And like we said, if you want to come and join us on one of our surveys, a lot of them, there's one of them which is around ID, but actually it's a learning experience. And half the time I'm going, Christ, what is that? And I'll take a photo of it and I'll go around. Or I'll ask the other people there if they might know what it is, because a lot of us doing it, we might be specialists in certain things. I'm a bit better with fish than I am with sponges. Sponges, like, not a clue.
That's so funny.
SpongeBob SquarePants, he's got about 5 million
you
cousins.
You do like fish, don't you? I can tell.
Fish pretty good. So if I'm going to take a photo of this thing. So I've taken a photo of the ormer shell, and then we click OK. I'm in. Oh, got to get the crop right.
Got to get the crop right.
Unfortunately, my photo's too close.
But
we'll see if it works anyway.
Okay, so then
what I've done is I'm in an iRecord now, and it's hopefully gonna have a guess at what it is. You can see it's just loading.
Oh, I see.
On this thing here.
Obviously, you're going to have signal as well and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the problem with a lot of technology, is that sometimes when you do the product demonstrations,
it struggles.
They don't always work.
Yeah. I've got no data.
Okay, so
but essentially, you do that, and then it would come up with 80% chance it's an ormer, 10% chance it's a snail, 4% chance it's someone's ear, or whatever.
But really, if you just upload that, then at least the record's
if you upload
there,
it,
right?
the picture's there, and someone will go through it and they'll go, oh, okay, I can see why you thought it was an ormer, but it's actually a whatever, a
this
crab.
and that,
you
yeah.
know?
Do we do that? We don't do that for a lot of animals. I mean, you don't do it for a rabbit, do you?
Yeah, so if you wanted to, you could definitely take a picture of a rabbit and do that. If you saw a blackbird in your garden, you can do it. If you've got a flower in your garden that you're interested in, you can do it for that. If it's an ant, absolutely anything, or a tree, or whatever, do it for all of them. The more, the better.
I can't wait to get involved in this. And I'm not going to go too far.
Well, you can see, and I can show you. You can see your records as well. So you can go onto like a map, and you can see all the records that you've.
So it's like
done.
a game.
Yeah.
So like, are you meeting up in the pub and like comparing records? Yeah.
Yeah.
We should have a leadership board, really like a proper on island game. Who can record the most amount of things?
It's a good in America. There's this famous like eBird list thing, and they all compete. across like each states to get the best bird list. So
Wow.
it's not I don't think it's such a silly idea. Like,
No, no, absolutely. I mean, look, there's a lot of people that I think retire to Alderney for this reason as well,
mm,
which is really exciting.
yeah.
So look, Alex, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about, or we can let you go?
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, do I have anything else of interest in here? I've got a bit more time. I can show you some
Well,
more
I
Oxford
tell you
tricks,
what,
but
let's leave it there for now. But thank you so much indeed, and yeah,
no,
we'll see you
cheers.
soon.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks.